listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, hey folks, welcome. It's Monday night. Monday after a short weekend, it seems. And except for us, no kids in school today. So we have a long weekend with children at home all day. And it's cold outside. We had snow over the weekend, although it's sunny and gorgeous here right now in Wisconsin. Sending the kids outside was still kind of tough because it's cold outside. So all that to say good evening. Welcome to the program. And this is Scotty Roberts, your host. It's the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come and see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio and find out all the different outlets where you can hear this show in its rebroadcast. And Odyssey carries the audio version of this program. Now, if you want to watch the video simulcast, come on over to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And of course, one of the best parts about the YouTube channel is that you can come over and you can join the other Intrepids in the live chat room, which is going on right now. So come on over as people start to pile into that chat room and have a good time talking up a storm. While you're there at my YouTube channel, join the channel, subscribe, hit the little bell. You'll get notifications, and you can also become a member. And there are perks for memberships. You can see all those by hitting the join button, and it'll tell you some options you might have if you want to join us. And so welcome to the show. It's Monday night. And tonight I got some interesting stuff I want to talk about. I want to start getting into something about what makes a language sacred. Is there such a thing as holy language? And that is, it's hard to separate that out from religion and different religious practice and different religions around the world that have their language, their sacred language of their religion. But is there a sacred language that goes deeper than that goes further back than that? A language that perhaps roots from an originator, a creator, something that was a common language, maybe not in common use amongst humans, but something that was the core, the base, the foundation, the foundational stones, building blocks of what we have as language now. What is sacred language? When you look at the book of John in the New Testament, it talks about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same was in the beginning with God. It's talking about, in the Greek, the Logos, the great Logos. What is that? Well, we'll look at that in a few minutes. I want to dig into that, but before we do, I want to get to our Spark Courage of the Day. Now, we've been doing this almost every show, and there's 50 of these in this box. And we'll know when we start running out of them, and maybe we'll do some other things. But I thought that this was a great practice to start putting into place. Pulling one of these faux matchsticks that has a little saying on it, a little writing on it, that helps to spark our courage in ways that we can be bold in our lifetime. And not our lifetime, in our daily life, our daily walk, things going on now, in the now, today. Now, all of us, me included, of course, we're all imperfect creatures. We all carry out our lives, and we all have goals for our lives. We all envisioned ourselves when we were younger, or if you're still young now, we envision ourselves as being these great things, these great idealistic things that we want to achieve and become. And then we go and we get married, we get involved, we have children, and we want to bring all of that with us. But sometimes we start to lose that vitality. We lose that boldness. We make mistakes. We trip up. We're imperfect beings every day. And so how can we, in our imperfection, out of our imperfections, strive to be more bold, strive to be more courageous in our life? That's what I like about these little faux matchsticks. And now, see, and those of you who've already seen this a million times, well, at least a dozen times, There's the matchsticks. They come like that, and it's supposed to look like a box of matches. And we just open this up, and we dig through here, and we find one of the sayings. And there's 50 different ones in here. So trying to do this so you see it on the camera as I'm doing it. Here, just tip the camera down a little bit. There you go. And let's dig in here and see if there's one we have not gotten yet. Let's just pull one out of the bottom after I've mixed them up a bit. There we go. Full matchstick in the lips. Let's close that up so I don't spill them. Let's see what today's says. All right. Here you go. This is a biggie. Can you read this? Look at that. I'm going to hold that up there and see if the camera will allow it to be focused. Let go of the past. Forgive someone or release an old grudge. How, you might ask, does that make you bold? How does that make you courageous? Well, because I think off the top of my head, sometimes just going to somebody out of your past to ask for forgiveness for something either you've done wrong or to try to find ways to resolve old grudges and old problems between you, that's a tough step. And that takes a lot of boldness, and it takes a lot of courage. I remember I was dating someone once, and that person's mom and I had, her mom had problems with me because I was older than her daughter, than she thought her daughter should date, and so on. And I made a phone call to talk to the dad. I said, maybe we should get together. And he said, you know what? He says, you're awfully bold. It took you a lot of courage for you to give me a call. And I asked him, well, why? Why does it take courage to call you? I want to resolve this. I want this thing to be right. Whatever the problem is, the perception, and so on. And so sometimes stepping out on a limb, being bold, being courageous, means you're going to go confront. Now, confrontation, that word doesn't always have to have this negative shroud hanging about it. That to confront somebody means it's a negative thing. No, it's a very positive thing sometimes. To be able to confront, to be able to say, hey, what is this thing that needs forgiveness? What do I need to ask forgiveness for? What do I need to grant forgiveness on? What is an unresolved issue? What is an issue that may remain unresolved forever or have no ability to be resolved that you and I can find the boldness and the courageousness, the courage to resolve amongst ourselves, between ourselves? There are sometimes, do you ever have situations where you have created the problem? An action of yours created the problem, and yet, and it was not out of malice, or you didn't intend to create a problem, but you did by your actions, either acts of omission or doing something the wrong way or misappropriation or fumbling the ball or whatever it might be. The onus and the responsibility is on you for the problem existing. And yet, you can't resolve it. It's a thing of the past. It's something you don't even have the ability to resolve anymore. What do you do about that? Do you go to those people and say, look, I created a problem and I can't fix it, but I can fix the now. Do you want to make this right between us? And so on. It's that kind of an issue. Do you have the boldness to do that? The reason I ask this is, if you are in the wrong in something, do you have the boldness to go to the other person and ask forgiveness? To let go of the problem and ask for forgiveness? If you are the person who was wronged, if you're in the right, so to speak, do you have the boldness to go to somebody else and say, hey, you screwed up. I'm in the right on this, but I want to patch this up because life is too short. I need to let go of the negative problems that maybe the other person created, and you are rightfully or righteously in anger or dislike of this other person. Is that worth it? Is what you lost, is the hurt that was inflicted on you greater than making it right and making it good again? The reason I ask this, and I've mentioned this before in other contexts, when I was a youth pastor, I used to tell the kids in my youth group, I said, what is forgiveness? And what is forgetfulness? And we've discussed this before. This has gone round and round in the chat room before on different topics in different contexts. This whole thing of forgiveness and forgetfulness. Does forgetfulness means it's erased from my memory banks? That I no longer can access that data? No. Forgetfulness means it's a cognitive act. I will act as if this never happened. I will forget that this happened and move forward. And I used to tell my youth group, I said, if you are the person who has created an offense with someone else, be the first to go to that other person. If you are a person who has been offended by someone else, be the first to go to the other person. So what the letting go is on this little matchstick, what do you need to let go of? You need to let go of the negativity that pervades whatever the brokenness is that's there. Now, obviously, there are going to be some things that are tough to forgive, tough to let go of. If somebody really wrongs you, now I'm not talking about the wrong of, is there a price tag you put on the wrong? Oh, well, if it had been $10, it would have been okay, but because it's $10,000, it's not okay anymore. The understanding being, what is the price tag you place on something that's wrong? Be it a physical price tag, a literal price tag, or a figurative or metaphoric price tag. That offense you caused is too great for me to forgive. And so you don't let it go. You let that thing be the thing that is pervasive and that drives you and drives all your thoughts and actions toward that other person. Or even if you end up on the short end of the stick with something, what good do you think it will do to be the forgiver and the forgetter? The one that steps out and says, I will forgive and I will forget. I have had a lot of people do things to me that are offensive things. From the small, stupid, silly perceptions to the large, put dollar signs on them even if you want to large things. I have also been the perpetrator of such things against people, from the small things to the large financial things, to the large metaphoric things. Those things are all out there. So which one of us has the ability to say, the wrong that was committed against me is more important than the wrongs I have committed against other people? Because we all look to justify ourselves in our own eyes. I look at the wrongs I've committed, and if I'm not thinking about it, I could go, well, I can justify why I did that and why that happened that way. And then there are wrongs committed against me, which I can justify hate and dislike. Now, like I said, there are some things that are justifiable. For instance, a recent story talking about the man who shot my mother and tried to murder her. Now, he's dead now, but would I have forgiven and forgotten? Forgiveness, that one's easy. I can forgive you, but I wasn't going to forget that. I was never going to open that door again to allow that person to harm my mother or me or any of my family members. So there are things you can forget the sin, but not forget the consequences, kind of thing. Those issues exist. And I'm not saying they don't or suggesting they shouldn't. But what takes boldness and courage is to go approach that other person, no matter what the wrong, unless it puts you in danger. There are obvious caveats to this. But to go to the other person and say, I forgive, I forget. I will render this an act of figurative forgetfulness, meaning I will never be able to erase it from my mind or my memory banks, if you will, but I will act as if it is erased. It's a thing that's in the past. Past cannot be changed. People change, but the past cannot be changed. You can't go back and change anything by holding offense, by holding grudge, by constantly being angry at somebody over something, unless they are continuing to dig in the knife or continuing to commit wrong against you. Past cannot be changed. So what do you do with that? You let it go. Letting go was one of the toughest principles I ever had to deal with. And it's still at times I struggle with that. How do you let go of something that you will always remember? How do you let go of past wrongs committed against you? How do you move on from that? I think that's where I think letting go and forgetfulness are things that are acts of the will. They are cognitive actions we take to ensure that we, in a sense, better ourselves. Because the more angst we hold against somebody, the more we are offended by somebody, the more we allow somebody to offend me and to trigger that response in me, the more it hurts me. I become the embittered person. You might not see it as embittered, but if you hold on to wrongs committed against you, what does that make you? A holder on of wrongs committed against you. Now, can you gain wisdom from wrongs committed against you? Yes. Can you understand how to deal better with that person or other people in the future? Yes. Should you hold the wrong against them? No. Sometimes you need to protect yourself from them committing more wrong against you, but you don't hold wrongs against. Okay? And you know where I'm going with this. You understand the difference, I think, between protecting yourself from evil being committed against you versus protecting yourself from letting go of things that you perceive as being the wrongs. Maybe they truly were wrong. So the boldness in this, the courageousness in this, is to let go of the past. Letting go is a tough thing to do, especially when it's always in the back of your mind that it's there. So you have to push it away. Say, I know that's there, but you know what? It's like healing from a broken arm because you tobogganed down an icy hill. Well, that's not going to have any context for those of you who live in the desert if you've never experienced snow. But let's just put it simply, running into a tree and breaking your arm. However you got into that tree. Now, you can heal from that. The arm mends, the bones all stitch back together, and years can go by, and sometimes you have a little twinge in there, or sometimes it's just gone forever. But anytime you go past that tree, or you see a tree that's like that, it might spark that memory. I ran into that tree and it busted my arm. What do you do with that? That's a memory you can never eradicate. It's part of your... But do you know something? If you practice forgetting about that, it will not be a pervasive thing. It won't take you over. So who are the trees in your life? Silly metaphor, silly illustration, but who and what are the trees that prevent you from letting go? Just say, I'm going to eradicate that metaphorically from my memory. And I'm not going to let that govern who I am or how I treat people or things or so on. So there you go. The boldness, I think, is in stepping up. The boldness and the courageousness is to step up and say, I will let things go and I will seek forgiveness from those that I've held grudges against. Holding a grudge Where, please tell me, under what circumstances, what religion, what spirituality, what form of thinking is holding a grudge a way to move yourself forward in life? Letting go of grudges, letting go of problems, letting go of past pains, those are things we have to do in order to proceed forward. And it doesn't mean we won't have scars. It doesn't mean we won't have things that we can look back on later on in life and say, I've had all these things have happened to me. It's how you process what's been done to you, how you treat yourself, the other person, the rest of the world, based on what you've learned. Have you been married and hurt in a divorce? Have you been loved and left and lost? And has that changed your view of love forever? I can never love somebody because this happened and that happened with that other person. What you're doing is letting that person and their actions dictate the way you will live the rest of your life. Can't do that. You become their puppet. Whether they're even trying to make you their puppet, you become the puppet of the person who hurt you. And you elevate their hurts done to you above everything else you can experience in life. And so again, we come back to 20 years from now, you'll regret more the things you didn't do than the things you did do. So cast away from the safe harbor. Set your sails to the trade winds. Explore, dream, discover. This is how you work your way out of those things. So, I'll be an encouragement to you. Be bold, be courageous, step out, let go of the past, move forward. And we're going to move forward now into our break. We'll be gone for a couple of minutes and we'll be back. We're going to talk about, is there such a thing as holy language? So you sit tight. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAlanRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, AlanRoberts.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hi, my dad. so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, guys, we're back. Thanks for sitting there on through the break and waiting for this show to return with bated breath, dripping with anticipation for what comes next. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's where you can go to hear this show in its audio format only. That's over at Odyssey Radio, ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, and check out all the different places where you can find the archives of this audio version of tonight's show. And you can come over to our YouTube channel and catch the live video simulcast of this show with the live chat room going on right now with fellow Intrepheads. And you can join the conversation over at my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And while you're there, you can look at the archives of about 350 past shows of the Intrepid radio program, as well as a bunch of my other stuff, my travels to different places around the world, to Egypt and other places. You can check out our paranormal investigations that we have a bunch of videos on that. You can check out my family stuff even. There's all kinds of things over there. I've also taken most of the books I've written and I've read them chapter by chapter or section by section. You can find those all down in the video sections, the book sections of my YouTube page. Again, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come over and enjoy. You've got years worth of listening to do over there. So thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate your taking your time to come and be part of this show. Go over and hit the join button on my YouTube channel, become a member of the Intrepid radio program, and see all the special perks that you'll get for becoming a member at different levels of membership. Just hit the join button. It'll take you to different levels, and you can look and see if you want to do any of those. And I thank you in advance. And so now let's move into this topic of sacred language. That's the overall topic. Sacred language, holy language. The big question is there such a thing as holy language? Is there a language that interfaces with us on a more sacred level? Words are more than just specks of ink on a page or symbols carved into rock or pressed into wet clay at the time that they were made. Words fall like these, like a vaporous mist on our thoughts, and it conveys much more than the thousands, perhaps millions, that people think. And so this is what we're going to look at, is the question of sacred language. But before we even get there, I want to talk about what sacred language, or what makes a language sacred at all. Why do we consider or hold something valuable on a spiritual level? What makes it sacred? And so language evolves for the support, the survival, the development of humanity. And at the same time, there are languages that are considered divine works, or the sacred writ, because they were created by God or are used for religious worship or study. And these are these things that we call sacred language. So when language is associated with some form of religious worship, believers begin to associate sacred attributes to the language. And as a result, concerns are raised about translation. What did that really mean in its original form? Context. What did it mean to the people to whom it was being written? The fear of untrue interpretations might cause a division in the religion, and within people's mindsets, by the way, as has occurred throughout history. And it's much simpler to maintain the uniformity of the religious message with a single language as the one true and only source of something. Therefore, The trainers of clerics over the generations have insisted on a uniform language that gradually strengthened the uniqueness and the sanctity of the divine language they're using. And in addition, the use of sacred language restricts access to the mysteries of the religion only to selected scholars who understand the languages, increasing their prestige in the eyes of the masses. Remember, in the dark to the Middle Ages, nobody knew how to read the Bible. It had only been translated into Greek and then into Latin, from Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek. And Latin was the language of the church. And could you imagine going to church and the scripture being read to you only in Latin that you didn't understand? You didn't take Latin. You're a poor person. You never went to school. And so you needed the priest to interpret that for you. And as we grew more in our knowledge over the centuries, the Bible was interpreted into English. Different sacred texts from different religions were interpreted into English or translated into English. And this took away that need to have somebody else tell us what it means. Until you get to the point where, like, even when I grew up in the church, everything I knew religiously I took out of the book in English, but you had your scholars that would say, well, you've got to go back to the original language because it interprets differently in the English. And so there's dozens and perhaps even more languages that are defined as sacred other than just Greek and Hebrew and so on. And the most prominent are Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic. And the Sanskrit language, which originated from the ancient Indo-European languages, is a language used mainly for ritual, for religious worship, as well as for poetry and science. The language was never spoken as a language and mainly used for writing. And to this day, the language Sanskrit is used to recite mantras, to study ancient texts. Sanskrit is very rich in describing abstractions and states of consciousness that don't exist in other languages. In fact, there's many Sanskrit words such as yoga, nirvana, karma, mantra, etc., those words that have become common in a wide range of languages around the world. And Greek is the language in which the New Testament and the Gospel books were written. And to this day, it's the language of Greek Orthodox Christianity. So Latin is the sacred language of the Catholic Church that evolves differently than the standard Latin as designated language of worship. And many writings of later Christianity were written in the Latin language. But both the Greek and the Latin sacred languages were the empire's formal languages, the Greek and the Rome respectfully, of their time. Islam believes that the Quran descended from the heaven in pure Arabic language. Therefore, classical Arabic literature has this special status in Islam. And it's considered inappropriate to translate the Quran into other languages because it may change the divine message. That's like these people in certain New Testament Christian beliefs believe that the King James Bible should never be interpreted out of King James English, 1611 archaic English language. It's kind of nonsensical, isn't it? Now, since most of the Muslims in the world today don't understand Arabic, the Quran is translated, but it's only considered a commentary rather than an actual translation. So despite its special status, classic Arabic itself isn't perceived as a sacred language in Islam, such as Hebrew for the Jewish religion or Sanskrit for the Hindu religion. So the Hebrew language, despite its being a living spoken language still today, is perceived by the religious Jews as a sacred language, as the language of creation, the language of the Torah. And even the form of Hebrew letters themselves has religious significance. Hebrew, which was a dead language for 2,000 years and was used only for religious purposes, was suddenly revived at the beginning of the 20th century, when you had Jews going back to what was then had become Palestine. It was Canaan before that, ancient Israel. When they started going back there and say, this is our ancestral homeland, and they wanted to settle there, and they started the kibbutzes and things like that, little farming communes. That's when they started reintroducing Hebrew as a language. And the Hebrew you hear spoken in Israel today in the 21st century, that language is the ancient language revived about 100 years ago. And so what makes a language sacred? Believers are going to answer that it's sacred. Sorry about that. Sorry about the noise. Kicked something on the floor under my desk. It's created by God. It's sacred because God created it. And critics are going to say that nothing has an inherent divine property. And only we humans, anthropologically speaking, are the ones who assign divine properties to things. It's us, we, the people, who make something sacred or not sacred. George Louis, I suppose you could say, sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone, and that is ringing right now, and I can tell you right now, that's an advertising. Somebody in advertising call. An advertising call. I'm going to turn off my ringer right now. Sorry about that, folks. Little scintillating live radio there. So, George or Jorge or Jorg Luis Borges, the way it's spelled. He's an Argentine writer. And he said, every book before being opened by the reader is merely an object without meaning. Only after opening and reading the book, when it touches the reader's consciousness, something new occurs, assigning meaning and attributes to the text. In that same sense, humanity assigns meaning to objects that are inanimate or are abstract. So this is what sacred language is in a, just a mechanical definition. Sacred language is something we ascribe sacredness to. All by itself, it's nothing. But there are those out there who think that sacred language is something that was created. And so, a question that's rarely asked and always taken for granted is language a part of our human origin? Or is its source something that's entirely different and unexpected? Did language come simply because we are human beings who have the intelligence to create language? Animals have language of certain sort. It's not as complex as ours. But a snort, a grunt, a bark, a growl, a tweet, whatever it might be, these are all forms of language in the animal kingdom. But the kind of language we have, I don't hear many, maybe it's because I can't develop the technology, I don't hear many rhinoceroses with radio shows. I don't see, many flamingos with a podcast because they don't communicate their language the same way we do. We're humans. So the question is, did that come with us as human beings, our higher intellect, a higher form of animal? Or is that something that is entirely different, something that was given to us? So first, examining language and writing throughout the centuries of human development has to be a priority to understanding this. And it's got to be understood that there's no valid way for scholars or researchers of paleography, that's the study of ancient handwriting and manuscripts, or graphology, the study of handwriting, or even linguistic specialists to determine which ancient alphabet or language predated the other, and or the true origins of the language. They can only surmise, make educated assumptions based on their field of expertise. We can also look at an artifact, a physical artifact, and you can tell if that artifact is older than this artifact. And if there is a language here on this older artifact, was it carved into that artifact later? Or was it on that artifact from the beginning of that artifact's origins. And that's a way you can date some languages. So, on the subject of language, origins based on gathered data, that's scholars strongly suggest that languages from across the globe all seem to have words that have their origins from a previous, similar, and possibly just an audible word. Everything has a source point. The chronological semblance of handwriting, alphabetic letters, equally reveals this to be fact. So it can be said that the origins of language and writing have remained relatively anomalous, or analogous, or comparable to each other. And here's a good for instance of that. Our word cat in English, C-A-T, the word cat. The pronunciation is K-A-T. Now, in different languages around the world is named either after the sound it makes, meow, the word itself, cat, or a word sounding very familiar. Albanian, you have mase. Arabic, kite. Kite or kuta. Armenian, katu. Basque, katua. Bulgarian, katka. Cantonese, mao, M-A-O-W, for meow. Chinese, miu, M-I-U, in English, or mao. In Czech, you have kakka. Dutch, you have kat, K-A-T. Egyptian, miu, or miu. English, you have cat. Estonian, kas, or kisu. Filipino, mio. Finnish, you have kissa. French, kat with a ch. Gaelic is kate, K-A-I-T. Caitlin comes from that, meaning kitten, cat. Or kati in Gaelic. German as kati, or katzi, or ket, K-E-T. Also as katz, C-H-A-T-Z. Greek, you have gata. Hebrew, you have katul. Icelandic, kotur, or katur. In Indonesia, you have kucing, or kut, K-U-T, J-I-N-G, kucing. Irish, you have cat. Italian, gatto. Latin, gatus. Lithuanian, katinus. Mayan, kat, K-A-T. Norwegian, kat, K-A-T-T. Polish, kot, K-O-T, or gato. Russian, you have kot, K-O-T. Slavic, you have maka, or mukka. Spanish, gato. Turkish, kedi, K-E-D-I, or kitska. Ukrainian is kit. Welsh is kat, C-A-T-H. Or Yiddish, katz, like Katzenberger, think of that. Zulu, Africa, you have ikati. And so this is just by way of example. All the different languages that have a form of cat, what we have finally come down to in the English is cat, or meow, mew, with the sound of a cat's, the sound it makes. And the most basic analysis by letter of the word cat, C-A-T, comes from the Hebrew word katul, K-A-T-U-L, which is derived from the three following Hebrew letters, K, T, and L. And that's ket, C-H-E-T, tav, and lamed, those three letters in the Hebrew. And it indicates to wrap around. And it's the precise description of what cats do when they sleep. They wrap around. And to wit, cuddle. The word cuddle, our word to cuddle something, is also a spin-off from the word cat in the Hebrew. And so interestingly, even the English word for kitten stems from the Hebrew root word for a small child, which is called katan. And the English word for kid referring to a child, is another example derived from the words of kitten and katan. In Yiddish, a small child is called Ketzel. In German, Kinder. And in Dutch, Kinderen. And for the linguistic at heart, this is the entire study of etymology of language, or otherwise known as the history of words and their origins. So you can see how the origin of this all came from very similar sources. So in mutual agreement, the paleographers, the graphologists, the linguists are able to say that we can associate these types of words or style letters with a certain group of people that lived in a specific area or era. But again, no linguistic scholar with any credibility can admit with certainty which writing style or language was the first of its kind. Scholars can say that most primitive writings are those that are pictographic. Think of hieroglyphs. Think of cave paintings. They use dots or dashes or squiggles, but this also remains largely speculative. The estimated time period of writing, the written language, began approximately 5,000 years ago. And some theorize even much further back than that. Graphologists have compilations of typographic and pictographic letters and charts to which we can relate, which show us the progression of each of these alphabetized, stylized letters in use today, with only small variances between the letters. You can see how some of our letters, like take the letter D or L or M or P or whatever, how all these now modern symbols you can trace back in their origins from the word pictures into simplified into what they are now. And and that's very interesting, by the way. So in analyzing all these graphs and charts, there's a clear trail of how word pictures or pictorials have emerged and evolved into letters. It's morphed into letter of one kind or another. And that becomes, what becomes undeniable is the strong similarities that each letter shares in relationship to the others. Now, you say, where are we going with this, Scotty? This is all, and there's a bit more left on this to cover. But what I want to talk about is, while all of this introductory material to talking about sacred language seems dry, stiff, we're talking linguistics, we're talking how letters are formed and words are formed, an introduction might seem mild, drab, to people who really have no interest in it. To me, it's kind of exciting to see the mathematics, if you will. This is the only way math makes any sense to me, is seeing how it works in things like this, the putting things together. There's very few people really have an interest or to see the importance in writing our language, even though we use it daily to communicate. Not many of us, while we use language, determine how we use it or why. And this is where I've said many times, we've heard it in politics, we hear it in everything in life. Words mean something. The way we speak means something. If you speak in a certain way, you can be deemed educated, or you can be deemed uneducated, smart or stupid, intelligent or not so intelligent. By the way we use language, the way we use words, the way we spell words, the way we structure words together in a sentence. You can usually tell somebody who's been educated and somebody who hasn't by the way they phrase things. So those things are important to some people. And language is an important thing. The way people perceive you is by your language. The things you say, how you do things. And you may understandably question, how can language then at any point be considered holy or sacred? How does that fit into the picture of language? And we're going to get to that. But before I do, I want to go through a little bit more of this basic stuff so we have a basic understanding of what we're talking about. in the etymology of language, why language means something. Scholars assume that Sumerian language appears to be the oldest written language in human history. They assert that it's not related to any other known language or writing, and it's known as cuneiform. And we've talked about this before. We've shown pictures. I might even, for those of you watching on the video, I might even have a picture of cuneiform still up here. Here we go. Let's look at this. Watch your screen, and I will turn this on. Boom. Cuneiform. Boom. It's not working. I don't know why. Oh, because there's something over the top. No. I have no idea why cuneiform is not showing up. I may have dropped it out of the background here, but that's not showing up. So we'll move on from that. But there's cuneiform. What was cuneiform? It's Ugarit and Akkadian language. And the cuneiform clay tablets are associated with those peculiar-looking wedged-shaped dashes that are carved in clay rock in different directions and symbols, and different compilations of those put together to represent certain words in a language. And this is where the rubber meets the road. What most people don't realize is that these iconic letter forms are actually the same that you find that form the Hebrew language, ancient Hebrew. The slight difference with the cuneiform writing is that it's transpositional in reverse of order to that of Hebrew letters, in which the letters are shown either sideways, to the left, facing up or down, different directions, and so on. In other words, the letters have just swapped positions. And the matching cuneiform letters that are the most identifiable to those of the Hebrew letters are shown in the, well, and I can't get the picture to call up, so I can't show you in video. So as one can see, go look up cuneiform. You're going to see it on, just do a Google search, put in cuneiform, 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 and you're going to see what it looks like if you don't know what it looks like. In other words, the letters have swapped position and in the Hebrew, and the language starts to evolve into other languages. So one theory for why they chose the wedge-shaped method is that it was easier to carve the letters in clay. They could have one stylus and one shape, and they just punch that in, turn it sideways, do a point, do a backside, and so on and so forth. And so that's how they created their language. It was easy to carve that way in clay or in stone, as opposed to the rounded curves of Hebrew letters. However, the question remains, which writing style predated the other? We're going to look into that, and I'm going to present you some theories on that. Now, these same letters are also shared with Phoenician writing, or Old Aramaic writing, which is considered an early form of Hebrew writing. But they're the predecessors of Egyptian hieroglyphs that are pictographic, figurative, symbolic, phonetic, and represent the sound of an object. A feather. They would draw a feather. Look at the letter F. F with two prongs coming out to the sides. Now put a little more curvature in that. You get the F, and then you can see that. If you added more lines, you would have a feather. That's where F started to stand, or the feather began to stand for the word feather, and the feather turned into the letter F as the first letter of the word. And so that's what's interesting when you start looking at that. And so additionally, when we examine Chinese writing, remarkably, you can see that there are also similarities with the Hebrew letters, with cuneiform, the Phoenician letters, and you can see, go look up Chinese, and you'll see, do a side-by-side of Chinese with cuneiform, and you'll get the idea. And I'm sorry, my images for those of you watching are not showing up here. And so there's even similarities that resembles letters found in the Mayan pictographic letters. The Vedic Indian writing, Sanskrit, is similar. And it's an offshoot from the Arabic writing that was introduced in the Middle East by traders. So the Arabic writing is an offshoot of the Phoenician and the Hebrew writing. And there's so much more on this that we can go into, and I'm going to show you a couple of charts tomorrow that show some similarities in these things. But all of this is at the base of the question. Is there a sacred language? Is there a holy language? A language of esoterics? We're going to dig into that a little bit more tomorrow, but for now we're out of time. So I want to thank you for being here. We'll pick this up where we left off. You guys have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. 23 hours. Sit tight.